Every nation on Earth owes money. The numbers are staggering, but the question is haunting. If everyone owes, then who's owed? Welcome to FinLore, where numbers become power, and power becomes the story of our age. Because debt isn't just a burden we carry, it's the invisible architecture that holds the modern world together. And one crack in that structure can shake every nation at once. The global paradox. Today, the planet is buried under more than $315 trillion in total debt, 3 times the size of the global economy. The United States leads the list with over $38 trillion, followed by the European Union with $14 trillion and Japan with nearly $9 trillion. But even the richest nations, even the oil kingdoms with vaults full of gold, all owe more than they own. So how can the entire world be in debt and yet still function? The answer lies in a dangerous truth. Modern economies no longer trade in value, they trade in promises. The invention of the IOU economy. The concept of debt as we know it didn't begin in Wall Street or Washington. It began in war. In 1694, England was losing a costly war against France. Gold reserves were vanishing. So the crown turned to merchants, offering them something revolutionary: money tomorrow for trust today. In exchange for loans, investors received a royal promise backed by future taxes. It was more than repayment. It was the birth of faith-based finance. That deal gave birth to the Bank of England and the modern bond market. Other nations followed. France, the Netherlands, the United States, all discovered that debt wasn't weakness, it was leverage. If you could convince the world you were good for your promises, you could spend infinitely more than you possessed. And that's how nations learned to conquer, not through gold, but through credit. From empires to economies. By the 20th century, debt had become the bloodstream of civilization. Every bridge, every school, every war financed through bonds. When the Second World War ended, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new monetary order. The decision they made still rules your wallet today. The US dollar would become the world's anchor, its value tied to gold, and every other currency tied to the dollar. It was a peace treaty. The United States became the banker of the planet. But peace never lasts. The day money lost its meaning. By 1971, the United States was drowning in war expenses and social programs. Foreign nations, sensing weakness, began demanding gold instead of paper. That's when President Richard Nixon made a decision that quietly changed the DNA of money itself. He severed the link between the dollar and gold. From that moment forward, the world's reserve currency was no longer backed by anything tangible. It was backed by trust. Paper money became faith money, and debt became limitless. The machine of infinite credit. Once the dollar was set free from gold, the age of controlled finance ended. Governments discovered a new kind of alchemy, printing value from promises. The U.S. Treasury issued bonds. Banks and funds bought them. The Federal Reserve purchased them again, creating new dollars in the process. Every bond became someone's asset. Every asset became someone else's collateral. A web of belief stretched across continents. The system worked. As long as everyone believed, the other would never stop believing. But belief, like currency, can inflate. The world's borrower in chief. Today, America's debt sits at over $38 trillion. Every second, that number rises. Every minute, more IOUs are born. Foreign nations hold roughly a third of it. Japan, China, the UK, and a chain of financial havens that disguise trillions behind shell companies and sovereign funds.
But the majority? America owes it to itself. Pension funds, banks, mutual funds, and the Federal Reserve, all holding U.S. treasuries like sacred scripture. It's a mirror economy. Americans pay taxes, which fund interest payments, which return to the same institutions that lent the money in the first place. It's not robbery, it's recycling of faith. The global web of promises. Japan lends to the U.S. The U.S. lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing countries through the IMF, and those same countries lend back to the West by storing their reserves in dollars and bonds. It's a closed loop, a planetary balance sheet of infinite IOUs. If any major player stopped rolling their debt, the entire chain would shudder. Because the truth is, the world doesn't owe money to one person, it owes it to itself, and to the illusion that tomorrow will always pay for today. The priesthood of debt. Behind this structure stands a new kind of power. Not kings or generals, but central banks. They are the high priests of the modern financial religion. They don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank buys government bonds, they create new money, swapping a promise for another promise. On one balance sheet, it's a liability. On another, an asset. On yours, it's a number on a glowing screen you trust more than you understand. That's why every dollar in your pocket isn't wealth. It's debt. Someone else's obligation, circulating as your confidence. The confidence game. This is the secret at the core of the system. Debt isn't meant to be repaid. It's meant to be believed in. Governments roll it over endlessly, issuing new bonds to pay off the old ones. Economists call it refinancing. History calls it survival. As long as investors believe interest will be paid, the game continues. But once belief falters, everything turns to dust. We've seen it before. Greece, 2010, austerity, unemployment, despair. Argentina, 2001, riots, currency collapse. Sri Lanka, 2022, political chaos, fuel lines, hunger. Debt doesn't just vanish, it consumes faith and replaces it with fire. The illusion of control. Politicians often promise to balance the budget, to pay down the national debt, but that's theater. If Washington truly paid off its debt, the entire global system would collapse overnight. Treasury bonds are the foundation of modern finance. Banks use them as collateral. Pension funds rely on them for safety. Central banks treat them as money itself. Eliminate the debt, and you eliminate the safest asset humanity has ever known. It's a paradox. The system survives only because the problem never ends. Debt as power. For 2 centuries, the ability to borrow has been the ultimate measure of power. Empires no longer need colonies to extract gold. They extract interest. Every dollar the world holds is a vote of confidence in America's promise that it will keep paying interest forever. But that promise comes with a price. The world's prosperity depends on America's debt addiction. If Washington falters, if investors panic, the tremor doesn't stop at its borders. It ripples through every market, every pension, every nation. That's how America's debt becomes the world's crisis. And here lies the quiet injustice of the system. When we say we owe it to ourselves, it sounds harmless, even noble. But that's only half true, because not everyone benefits from the cycle. Interest payments flow upward from workers and taxpayers to the institutions that hold the debt. Debt, at its core, is a machine that transfers wealth from the many to the few who own the promises. The global system rewards the holders of credit and punishes those who live within their means. Inequality doesn't rise despite debt, it rises because of it. The fragile future. So what happens when the rhythm breaks? When growth slows, interest rates rise, and faith begins to falter? The answer won't come from Wall Street or Beijing. It will come from the collective realization that the world can't refinance its way out of reality forever. Every empire that relied on infinite credit eventually reached the same destination, a crisis of belief. The British pound, the Roman denarius, the Spanish silver dollar, all were considered eternal. All fell when trust evaporated. The end of the illusion. Debt isn't evil. It's simply a tool, a mirror reflecting human ambition. But when ambition turns to dependency and borrowing replaces creation, the mirror shatters. The tragedy is not that we owe money. It's that we've built an entire civilization on the assumption that debt will always be safe. The world doesn't run on gold anymore. It runs on confidence. And when confidence breaks, we'll remember what money really is, a promise that only works as long as we all keep pretending. If this gave you a new way to see the world, subscribe to FinLore, because debt isn't just economics. It's the story of how power survives and how civilizations forget that every promise, no matter how powerful, has an end.